been to one of the talks before. This is the third talk. We had the first one in March, and the second one in April, and now this is May. The whole sort of basis of the talk is, in terms of curating it, because I'm creating the talks, is to find artists who break out of the form that they work in. So, for instance, last month it was a composer who worked in art. Yeah. So when I talk about art, I'm not talking about people who paint. I'm talking about people who make art. So there'll be in the future filmmakers. There'll be cartoonists. There'll be lots of different people who use art in lots of different ways and sort of blur the edges. Because I think one of the problems in England is that we have this desire to put everything in boxes, and creativity doesn't work like that. So, I'm just going to say a couple of things about other things that are happening. On the 27th of May, which is quite soon actually, we have a big event here in the whole gallery called the Southwest Creatives, where we're inviting people who think of themselves as artists in any way, to basically come and meet other artists. So do look on our website, because there's going to be talks, there's going to be films, there's going to be music.
It's free.
And it's free.
But you do have to register.
Yeah, you do have to register, but basically it's all on the website. And also the next art talk will be by Frank, and that will be on June the 4th, so do come along to that. Okay? There are other things that are happening, but just look on our website. So I want to introduce very formally Kim, even though many of us know her. Kim Von Coels is a German artist and photographer who resides in Glastonbury. She graduated with a degree in graphic design and photography from Central St Martin's in 2004, and has spent the years since exploring various mediums, including drawing, painting, street art, murals, music and performance art, as well as her main passion of photography. After a lifetime of playing with different photographic styles and techniques, both digital and analogue, she has spent the last 7 years honing her skills in the niche area of light painting. And that's what she's going to talk about now. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Hey everyone. I do recognise most of you, so thanks for coming. I'm going to talk to you first of all about what light painting is, so you're going to get an understanding of what it actually is, why I love it, and then I'm going to show you some pictures and show you some tools so that in case it's something you're interested in and you might want to try, you can see how it's done and how I do the various effects. So I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll go through some slides and show you my work and how I achieve the effects. Light painting is photography, essentially, but it's long exposure photography. It's actually quite vast. My interest in light painting is to do with making interesting abstract images that aren't real. The technique is in the dark, and you use various light forms, whether they're hand-held or different bits of light in various ways to create an image, basically. You literally are painting with light. So just quickly as an example, this is a really simple one. It's just I'm moving a light through the picture, and that's what's created this. So that's just anything where you're adding a light source to a scene or a person, like a model, or in any way, is called light painting. That can include moving the camera, so kinetic photography, or camera rotation, where you have a fancy device where you kind of illuminate the scene and put the lens cap on, and you turn the camera and you do it again, and it's not something that I'm capable of, it's a little bit too technical for me, but anything you can move, literally you can just hold the camera and move it. You can do the thing, light trails, I'm sure you've all seen light trails where people put it up on a motorway and you see all the kind of things moving through the cars coming through the red and white lights. So that essentially is what light painting is. It's long exposure photography where some kind of light is illuminating or moving through the scene. I love it because I like things that are a bit different and a bit weird and unusual, and when I first discovered it, it allowed me to create really interesting effects on a budget. You know, we started literally with a single torch from Proper Job. It cost £1, and we would use it to, in fact, the one before that was even simpler. It was just a tungsten torch. It didn't even work properly. It kind of was a bit wobbly. Create this wonderful warm light. You have tungsten light, which is warm, and LED light, which is very cold. And it was just to illuminate the models from an angle and imitating expensive kind of kit that you'd get in a studio, so like soft boxes or such like. And you could just do it with a torch, and it was great because we created these pictures on a budget. Once I discovered it online, everything went whoo, and we moved on from our simple just lighting a person with a torch to this world where people had come up with so many different ways of using lights and drawing with lights and illuminating people and things. And I love it just because it's different, it's fun, it's quick. I'm very impatient. I don't have the patience to create masterpieces in terms of painting or drawing. I'm not actually very good at drawing or anything, despite what lots of people think. And photography for me it's good, it's instant, it's a satisfaction. You do it, especially this light paint, you kind of have this experience where you're creating an image and it's a time period. Even if it's just the exposure, exposure could be a few seconds or it could be up to 5 minutes, and you spend this time. Often I photograph mainly people with people that you like, and it's just, the experience of doing it and then having this instant satisfaction of this thing that you've created that never actually existed in real life because you only light parts of it at a time, so you're building up the different parts over time. And I just think it's fascinating, and you can it's endless. The possibilities are endless. The things, if you look online, the things that people do are literally mind-blowing, and I've never ever run out of things to try in terms of what you can do. I don't have particularly long, and I do ramble, so I'm just going to go through some of the things that I've done and explain to you how I did it, and I'll probably come up with other random thoughts in the process. So I'm just going to start with the picture we have here, which is really super simple. And it's just, hang on, I've got to make sure I don't... Nobody's got epilepsy, have they? That's good.
No,
Not this particular dog. But this...
they didn't.
This picture is maybe 2 or 3 seconds with a black... It's actually in my attic. In a dark... It's always in a dark room or in a dark place. There can be ambient light, but I'll talk about that later. But this is pitch black. We set up, we focus. So you always have to focus on manual focus, and then... focus when there's lights on, and then you put it on manual so that it doesn't mess around when you turn all the lights off. You have everything ready, you turn all the lights off, and then you start your exposure. And with this one, I've literally just moved this light down over the model. In fact, I think I started here, and I moved up, and I whipped it out. 2 seconds, and that was it. And I have tried to recreate this 1,000,000 times. It is impossible. I die. I love this tool. It's called fibre optic. This one's black. I'm sure you'll recognise that. I used to buy, this is a proper one, but I bought a kid's lamp. It's the same thing. And I just took it apart and I put a light in it. I had a white one first, but the black one, what I like about the black one is you only see the tips. With the white one, you kind of get this smoky effect where the strands light up as well. But it's really one of my favourite. Mel, if you press down to the next slide, I can show you some examples of different ways of using it. So again, this one here is the white fibre. You can see that you don't just see the tops, you see this is the kind of where the light comes out of the torch into the fibre and has a more smoky effect. And I used a different coloured torch. I think I might even have it here. It had just a little bit of blue and green in the torch tip, so that when it went through, the tips lit up a different colour. Again, dark room, model's lying on the floor, and I've just gone behind her. And where these lines are on her body, this is touched me, you can see, and where these lines are, I've faced it forward, so it's created like drawing, essentially. You can do that really controlled if you can draw. I can't. And you can make great light drawing. There's a guy who does animations where he draws the same thing several times with a little light pen, sticks all the photos together, and it's like a little alien moving or something. It's really quite clever. Next one, please, now.
Kim, when you first started doing this, did the models know what you were doing, or
so I first started doing. We didn't really know what we were doing. No, I still don't really know what I'm doing. Often.
Well, no, there's obviously a big element of.
Yeah, it's
of
really
chance.
important. Well, it starts as chance, but then you learn the things that are likely to happen, and you learn the effects.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that's good about it is the trying and the playing. You know, when people ask, "Oh, if I'm going to do it, how do I?" And I'm like, the most important thing to do is just give it a go. and there's no right or wrong because you never know what's going to happen. You know, it's always different. Like, I have a photographic background, so I like plan certain parts of my image, but a lot of people don't, and they don't really care about that. And that's just me being a little bit of a perfectionist, and I know how I think things might want to look and stuff. But yeah, you can then start messing around with just literally just, this is a plastic non-slip mat from Proper Job. Yes?
Yeah, so probably with most of them, but particularly those ones with this,
Yes.
do you wear like black clothes, or do you like edit
It
that out?
depends. No, I never edit anything.
I thought you
So
might.
if it's really dark and I've got complete control, it doesn't really matter. So in the studio, I have complete control and it's dark, like really dark, like you turn off the lights and you literally can't see anything, like not even a little shadow of your hand. So I'm relatively safe because I have control of the light all the time. If I'm out on location and you have stars, light, moonlight, street light in the distance, reflections of street lights on the clouds in the distance, even if there's no street lights nearby, then yes, I always wear dark colours. Occasionally, you forget, or you don't, or your face kind of gets lit up by accident because you're shining something in the wrong, and it doesn't really matter. A lot of people might edit themselves out, but I kind of like that human element of it. But that happens more on location, which we'll come to in a bit. But yeah, in the studio I have a lot more control over what's going on.
How long have you got?
I've got as long as I want, because it's completely black. I am in complete control of all the light I'm putting into the image. So, for example, you learn the strength of your torches. I have different torches, they're different strengths. You know, this...
How long can you take to create an image?
My longest exposure is probably around 5 minutes, but I have friends that work up to 20 minutes at a time.
Wow.
Because they're doing things like rotations, or lens swaps is another technique, again, far too complicated for me, I don't have the patience for it, where during the exposure, they change from a wide angle lens to or actually it's probably usually the other way around, from a 50mm to a wide angle lens, so you can layer up 2 lots of the image, a close-up and what's the word I'm looking for, landscape, together. And it's in the same image, and the technique you do that is you put the lens cap on the front of the lens during the exposure, and that stops anything from happening, it keeps you safe. I'll show you in a picture later where I use the lens cap technique. It means that I can turn, I've got a head torch, so when I'm on location, the amount of things that can go wrong, but I have a batteryless head torch. So you put the lens cap on and you can walk around while you're doing the exposure, but nothing's going to happen, so I can see where I'm going, but I'll talk about that in a bit. Here, this is the fibre optic again, around her. She's leaning up against a plastic non-slip mat that I've taped to these metal posts. So we've taped it up, and she's just stood behind it, kind of like this, and I've used this little torch, and I've briefly just lit her face. It is, sorry about the exposure, it's a little bit difficult to show on the projector, but I've just lit her face. You can actually see that light there is when I accidentally point the torch towards the camera, and that's the head of the torch, the light coming down on her. I've then moved either side of her with a blue. I've got lots of bits of filters, different colours that I put in front of the torch. I can change my white torches, anything to any colour, because I have them all. And then I've moved around her with that, and then the red is created by one of those little laser pens. I have an example, but only in purple. Nope. She says that, and then she can't see it. No,
Is this
apparently I
hand
didn't
on
put
side?
it in. It's just a laser pen. So I've just gone either side, like obviously she's up against it, so I can't light her from this side because it'll hit the plastic. And she's like this, and I'm lighting her with a laser pen here. I come over here, laser pen here, careful not to kind of draw on the plastic itself. And this was luck again, I've tried recreating it, this is the one. That's a nice thing. You have these moments where it's like, it's the one. You know, you're messing around all night, and then suddenly, all that weird stuff you're doing, it all connects exactly right, and it's perfect, and it feels good, and you look at the back of your camera, and you're like, yes! And you don't really know, because it's your human body, and you're always moving different, and even if you think you're doing exactly the same thing, there's always going to be slight changes. Yes, Richard?
Isn't the laser light a little bit too fine a point of light to show up?
It depends. I used a weaker torch with this, so the laser in balance. I have this torch, which I never use in the studio, by the way. I'm going to point it over here. It's very bright. This will light up, will outpower anything else.
Right.
But the laser pen and a little tungsten torch, for example, are quite well balanced. And you get to know your tools, so you learn which ones work with which ones. And also I have a really bright torch and I put 3 different coloured filters on it to get exactly the right shade of blue, for example. I know it's going to create a much darker blue light and I need to light it for longer to get the same effect.
So how many, in order to get that one particular image, how many other photos did you get where it
I
wasn't
think in
quite
this,
as
in this set
illuminated?
of pictures,
Yeah,
we probably took about 20 photos.
right, so it's
And
a
another thing-
distillation down to get that.
Well, also sometimes you do it and you go, oh, it's great, and then you keep going,
Yeah,
and you don't notice till afterwards that was the one, and you know, but it's nice because you don't, and then you try something, oh, let's change the colour of the laser, oh, let's add a little bit of something. There's something called bokeh, which is when you put the points close and they're out of focus. So I do this and then I try and hold this closer to the camera and create some nice out of focus dots. Really difficult to control. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So you don't always know it's the one from an evening until the end of the night, and you look back and go, oh no, that feeling was the right one. Can I have the next one, please, now?
Yeah.
Wondering. Oh yeah. So here, the laser pen. So this is that same laser pen that I used in the previous image. It's literally just one of those little laser pens with a little button and you point at stuff. There's a white sheet behind her, you can see it here, and I've just tied it again. This is my structure. I just tie the white sheet in the corners, and she's on a platform so that it's easier to, she's like a little bit raised off the ground. And we get her in position. The composition, it's just a feeling. You kind of know what you like or what you don't like. If you've worked with models, if you do life drawing, for example, you know, you figure out what works. I always work with my friends, by the way. None of them are models, they're all just people that I know and love, which is another thing that I love about photography, is that I get to hang out with my friends and we get to create cool art together. But yeah, so Julie sits still, she gets her position, she sits still, and I've gone behind the white sheet at the beginning of the exposure. I have a friend that helps me often, Dominic. He is usually the guy that presses the button on the camera, so technically, if we're going to be really legal about this, all the photos are his. But yeah, he presses the button. I've got like a little, this little thing, so I plug this into my camera, and then I press the button on, and it holds it until I pull it back. So it's not a set exposure. It gives us the time that we need to do it, and then you do all the things, and then he's finished, and I'm like, okay, done, and he pulls it back. Sometimes you work with, like, I know that there's ambient light, so I've got 30 seconds before this particular street light makes this part of the picture too bright. So you limit it to 30 seconds and you run around like a lunatic trying to do all the things you're trying to do. So yeah, I've gone behind the white sheet and I've used a little 3-pound flash that usually sits on top of it. It's like a plastic flash. It's like a handheld one, and I press the test button with a little red sweet packet over the top of the light so it turns red. And I tried to aim it so that it's behind her. Didn't work out, the last one was over here, didn't look half as good. Again, we took this photo maybe 5 or 6 times. This is the only one that even looked remotely good. And it was, yeah, and I stood over here, and I just lit her with a pen. You can see it hitting the floor here as well, but because the floor is black, it doesn't show up as much, and because her skin is pale, it shows up really bright.
It's amazing.
And yeah, and I've just literally just gone and I note that if I go faster, the lines are cleaner. If you go slow, your natural thing is that you kind of wobble around a bit, so you have to be really quick to get these nice straight lines. And then I knew, because I was colouring her in, that I hadn't hit her arm, so I then came over here and I did it again on this arm so that we'd fill this in. You can see that between the flash and the laser, she moved a little bit, so the black silhouette is when I did the flashlight, and this little light here is when I did the laser. So people always move, you can't hold still, unless you're photographing the inanimate object, there's always a bit of movement. Next one please, Mel. So this is my goddaughter Aisha in her basement, and I used this. Okay, this is why I asked if you're all not epileptic. It's called a blade or a plexiglass shape, and this is a really clever torch. It has it's made for light painting. It has different settings, so different speeds of flashing, different brightnesses depending on what I want to photograph and balance against other light. And I've just stood behind her. So with this one, I have a little hood for this. And I've got one here now. I'm using them all. I actually use one of these backwards, and I've just lit her like this. I've gone just lit her so that I know she's going to show up. Or never light from where the camera is, because it's really boring and flat. Always light from an angle, from the side, from behind. Light, when you take a photo of someone and you use the flash on the camera, it's never really that good. You might be able to see the picture, people in the picture, but in terms of interesting or flattering, it's always nice for the light to come from an angle. So I think I lit her from over here. You can tell because it's darker here. And then I've gone behind her, and I've just kind of gone shh, like this with my blade. Again, you don't really see what you're doing. You know, you can kind of remember the light trails and the movement, and you guess as best as you can. But these are the only wings that day that looked any good. The rest of them are all completely skew-with. It's really hard to get it even, get both sides looking remotely even. But it's a really simple, very popular thing that people do, but it's not something I use very often. But I really like that. Most of mine are white, and then, like I said, I add a filter to make it a different colour. I've got literally a packet of different coloured filters, and I stick it in between the light and the blade, and it changes it to whatever colour I want. This particular one is made by a friend of mine, and he had this, and it's lovely. It creates this really warm glow, and this bit here we call the hot part. So it's here where the light's coming in, and before it distributes. My other blades don't do that. It's just this one, but I kind of like it. It kind of makes it look fiery. It's lovely.
Did you plan that shot to that sort of level, or?
Yes. This particular one I knew, and also she's in her basement. I was like, oh, we had to move a load of furniture, and it's like where they smoke. It's always smoking in the can't smoke in the house, smoke in the basement. There's like a little mattress and an ashtray and a little table. I'm like, move it all out the way. It's in. I don't want it in my picture. And we put this carpet down because somebody had drawn something on the floor and it looked rubbish. And it's this, and yeah, and this little cushion. And I posed her again. It's just that kind of familiarity of working with people. You know, she didn't always look this good in this shoot. This was just one that worked really well. And facial expressions as well, it's difficult because you're in the dark and you have to hold still for a long time. And the reason she's still, even though the exposure is probably about half a minute, is because I only lit her once. So I light her once, and then there's no light falling on her as I'm moving around with the blade. So even if she moves, it doesn't show because we're not lighting her again. We just froze her with that first moment. I have a really clever device, which I'm just going to see. It's a light blade. I haven't got the right thing on it. Oh, 1 second, wrong torch. She says, she can have the right torch. Let's use this one. So I do something, and I scan people in. So this is nice because you can go. That's my son's noise. And the light just kind of flows down and only lights one part of her at a time. So it's a really good way of freezing someone. The thing with it using a little handheld flash is you get really hard shadows. So what's nice about this is you kind of follow the body and you light the various parts.
So you would do that in front of the camera? You just
So
bring it down,
so
because
I
you're
would
moving,
probably,
it's not
I
being
didn't
done.
use this particular one for this shot,
No.
but it would have a similar effect. So I would stand with this facing the camera
Yeah.
and this facing the model, and I'd start the exposure and I'd go like that.
Right.
And because I'm moving this and the light's following, you don't see it because the light kind of fills it in as you go down. I might angle it slightly. It's always nice to have it coming down a little bit. But yeah, and that's done with the blade. Next one, please, Melanie. Oh, this one's really cool. So this is done in a full moon. It's quite a long exposure. You can tell because these are the stars and they've moved quite a lot. After about 30 seconds, stars move. You have about 30 seconds and then this happens, which sometimes is cool, sometimes isn't. This here is a house in the distance with a light outside, or maybe a street light in the distance. This is in my mum's back garden in Portugal, or actually just a little bit further. And the reason you can see the scene is because it's full moon. So I didn't actually light any of the stones. It's full moon, and that did it for me. This is my boyfriend Dave and my boyfriend Dave, and I used these. They're just little finger lights. You buy for £1 from Proper Job probably. I also use bike lights. I also use things like this. They're like little keyring lights, and I put sweet wrappers over the front, change colours. It's not what I use for this. I use this because these ones, they kind of show from different angles. This one only shows if I'm pointing it directly at the camera. So I know I use these because they kind of glow. So even if I kind of go left or right, they're still this point. So my boyfriend stood here. Actually, we started here, so he stands here like this. I can also do it on myself because I can just follow different parts of my body. So I've done this, moved the little light around his body, and I've just coloured him in basically, drawn all the way around him, all the way around, and I did his arm, and I talked to myself so that I know which bits of the body I've done. Okay, left arm, yeah, right arm, head, and I like chit-chatting away, and he stood there still waiting for me to finish, and then got these little green eyes, so I'm like, okay, let's estimate, we'll do an eye, yeah, and another eye, okay, great, right, and then I used this wishy-washy thing to create the light coming to here, and this star, I just flashed a torch directly towards the camera, which creates that burst of light. And then I was like, okay, Dave, other side, so he goes over the other side. Now here, you can slightly see, if you look closely, the outline of his hood, because he's against the sky. You can't see it here because the tree kind of blocks it. But his general kind of aura, I don't know what to call it, his shadow, I don't know, shadow self is in that. You can just see his hood. He had his hood up so that he didn't show too much. He's wearing dark clothes, but it did matter. Dark clothes was important because otherwise they would have reflected the light. And again, I just followed him. Here I moved slower or pointed it more towards the camera, which is why it's brighter or hotter, as we say. And here it's probably facing sideways, so it's, it's not doing that. It's gone round. I've just kind of coloured him in. And then I did the same again, over the rock. Ta-da! And yeah,
was that the image that you wanted, Kim?
So I create this image. There's a competition on a website called Light Painting Photography. They do once every couple of months. They give you a theme, and it's actually how I got. I haven't bought any equipment. I just won it. So I didn't win it with this image though, sadly. So they give you a theme. This theme was Lightman. It's a known technique. You can find tutorials on YouTube and the internet and stuff, and people do it. And they go, oh, this is exactly how you do it, and you can do it on yourself. I could lie down, and then I could swap my hands and do it with my other hand and stuff. So So this was just, and I think I did 5. This is the only one where there was 2. The other one, there's one guy here, and the other guy's kind of stood here. But this compositionally was the one that I liked the best. But none of them were bad. But this one was just, it kind of worked out better. It's the one that made me go, oh yeah, that's the one. Next, please, Melanie. Oh, also Portugal, lovely rocks. Now there's a really famous light painter called Eric Perret who works with his girlfriend Kim, and he didn't invent this, but he's made it his thing, and they create these incredible images. In fact, I've got the exact tube that I used for this picture, which is this one. This tube is a packaging for electrical rods for putting wires into walls, and I went to the electric store and I said, I really want one of those, but I don't want what's in it, I just want the packet. And they were all I was like, well, can you just pretend that I bought it and contact the company to send me a new packet? And they did, which was really nice of them. So they sent me the packaging for these electrical rods. In fact, it's even got it's got another tube inside. Hang on. This is the exact one. Can I open it? Yes, I can. Oh, I love that sound. So into here, I actually put 2 torches. I'm afraid I only brought 1 with me, but I have 2 of these. So 1 on flash and 1 on constant. So the constant one is the one that keeps the complete circle, and you can see this kind of flashing light. That's the second torch creating these lines. So I stuffed 2 torches in the end of there. As you can see, we have this other tube inside that has a blue piece of gel, lighting gel, and baking paper. The baking paper, what it does is it diffuses the light. And then this white patch at the end is this bit. And I stood behind my model. This is the only light in the image. You can see it's quite short because the stars haven't moved. And I just stood behind her. She stands still. In fact, I didn't even have an assistant here, so I kind of started the exposure. I ran up the rocks behind her. There was ambient light because it's just after sunset. So well, it's not just after, it's actually quite a while after sunset, but it's not completely dark yet, which is why you get this kind of leftover light in the sky. And I stood behind her, and I've just gone like this, in a circle. And after a while, you get a knack. I mean, I didn't do it perfectly then, but you get a knack. Kind of from a centre point. I mark a point in between her shoulder blades. I'm like, right, this is my centre point. I kind of concentrate, and I do a circle. I feel a bit like a Jedi when I'm doing it. And it creates this effect. Again, we did a few. It changed because obviously as we did it, the light changed in the background because it was to do with the sun.
Was that just one circle?
So that's 1 circle with 2 torches.
Yeah.
And it's probably, if I had an assistant, it would have probably been a shorter exposure and not worked out so well, because the fact that I had to walk from my camera and up the rocks gave more of this ambient light in the background. You can see the light from the tube here, but this here is because there was still some ambient light in the sky. So it's actually a little bit longer, and she's wearing just black clothes, and I've just wrapped a black tablecloth around her waist and kind of spread it out over the rocks and make her look glamorous. That was a technique from Kim and Eric. And it's really simple and really effective. And what's good about this is anyone can do it pretty easy, and it's a quick, effective thing to do to learn quickly and mess around. You can make all sorts. They make all sorts of shapes. Circles are my favourite though. Sometimes they don't match up so nicely, but yeah, that's that. And yeah, and oh, here we go. So this is where we have the ambient light from the outside. We also have the lens capping effect because there's holes in the floor, in 3 stories, so I lit on 3 floors. This is a weird abandoned building site in Spain. I think they were going to build some kind of holiday complex and it was going to be the office that never got finished. This is a giant hole in the side of the building that spans both floors. This building is like a light painter's dream. I could have spent days, weeks here, never run out of ideas. Again, same technique. I used a different tube. It was just plain. It was this one. This one's got a red filter in it, but I think it was this tube without the red filter. It's just a plain tube. You can see with this one has a cap on the end, so it didn't create a line. This one does not have a cap on the end, so it created this line on the floor as I turn the circle. So this white line on the floor is this circle. This is also good. So here, the circle created her silhouette, but the ambient light made her face blurry because this is probably a 5-minute exposure because I had to walk around all over the place, and you can't hold still for 5 minutes. So her face is kind of blurry because she's breathing and blinking and God knows what. I had my boyfriend Dave assist me. He's at the camera. He has, I think he had a black hat that we used. It wasn't actually my lens cap because it's a bit fiddly. And I have this really powerful torch which lights up buildings in every colour I want. So I have I chose a bunch of colours. I did this in a bunch of different colours. This was just my favourite one that worked out the best. Let's see, we had purple, we had yellow, oh no, yeah, oh yeah, and this blue. So this blue, this yellow, this purple, and then was there pink somewhere? I feel like, oh yeah, this edge is actually pink, so we have pink. So I have one in my left pocket, and I know which one's which. I'm like, right, left pocket pink, right pocket purple. And I put my yellow in my mouth, and I'll put the blue on here, and I'll walk around like this. It's nice. Do this. So I actually started by doing the circle behind her, and then I didn't need to do anything, and I walked over here behind this pillar, and I stood behind the pillar, and I made sure that the camera was hidden behind the pillar, and then I'm going to put it on a lower setting, and then I just went like this with the torch, with the purple, which gives you this light here. You see the shadow, and I knew it wasn't going to shine into my camera because my camera was hidden behind this pillar. So once like that, I counted my steps between her and here, and then I did the same on the other side. Walk over the other side, colour the torch off in between. Sorry, colour it in. Up. Then I turned my torch off. I told my boyfriend to put his hand. I think we used this black hat. So we then held this black hat in front of my camera, so the photo is still happening, but nothing can affect it because he's got this hat right in front of the lens. It's stopping any light from coming in. I then turned on my head torch, and I walked the stairs just down. I walked up the stairs, and I came over here, and I was like, okay, ready, and he took the hat away, and I stood on the edge of this ledge, and I lit the blue. I just lit it in a circle, so I lit the ceiling, I just went like that, and I went like that, and I looked down the gap, and I lit the edge, this edge here. I think there's a little ridge that's missing, which is why you get this lovely blue bit that came through, but this one has a ridge, so it created this shadow. All pure chance, I didn't plan any of it. So yeah, and then I walked over here, and I shone pink at this edge. So this is actually pink, it doesn't show so great on the projector. Oh yeah, in between I'm all, doing this. Put this one, I'll put that in the back pocket so I know it is, and right, put this one in. Then I told Dave to hold the hat in front of the camera again. So I'm like, okay, lens cap, yeah, okay. I turn my head torch on and I walk all the way down the stairs to the bottom floor, and I put the yellow in, and I stood underneath where the camera is, so where Dave is here, I'm stood on underneath directly, and I've shone the light forward and hit this edge with the yellow. And this was just the consequence of these beams lighting the ceiling. So I've just lit from underneath, and here I accidentally hit her. That was, at the time it bothered me. I was like, no, this is a massive mistake, but who cares?
Why doesn't the light from your head torch have an effect?
Because I turn it off when this is not in front of the camera.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So I put my head torch on, walk to my location, turn it off, then he releases it, and then I shine with the yellow. So I love this rainbow building thing. I'll come back to it later. It's one of my favourites. It's super simple. It's just it's literally colouring in, is what I'm doing. This is the tube again. It's a yellow one. This is just before sunrise. It's misty. It's on a flooded field just down on the estate that you've probably all seen or walked past or walked your dog at next to the Cinnamon Lane play park. It floods. It was 4 a.m. It was freezing. Literally, this is ice on the water. You can see the grass coming through because it's actually not very deep. She stood in wellies and a dress, and she did not complain. She was it was 4. I think by the time I picked her up at 4, I think this was about 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock. The sun was gonna rise in about half an hour, maybe an hour after this. So this is just the really early dawn light before the sunrise, and I've just used this. I think I had a red feather, not a blue feather, which is why you have this little bit of red on the outside. The yellow is the tinsel, where it catches the light. Hang on, find my light. This is not the best torch for this bit. Show you. So you see it kind of, sorry, baking paper diffusing, so it kind of comes through, and then instead of it shining, again, bad light for this, instead of it shining out, it stops it with this stopper, and it catches, and that's why you get this strong yellow light on the outside. It was just one torch in a circle. I had a button, so I didn't have to walk through the water. I had a clever button that was not connected. It was like a remote button, but they're not very happy in the cold, so they don't work very well. I think it was a 4-second exposure, and again, I've just stood behind her, I pressed the button, I've turned the tube. I had it set to 4 seconds, so I didn't have to unpress the button. And it's the light, which I love so much. It's mist, there's actually a hedge there that you can't see because of the mist. Pardon me. And yeah, and the colour of the light is that really early morning light. 4 seconds, circles, super, super simple. The reflection, I mean, I love it, but again, nobody wants to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and stand in freezing water to do that again. This is Christmas lights wrapped around a hula hoop. And I've stood behind each of the people, and I've just used a torch, and I've shone direction the camera. I'm not going to do it because I'll shine you all in the eyes. Just stood behind him, and I've lit, that's why he's got this little ring of light around him and this shadow. So I've just stood behind him, and I've gone dun-dun with white, stood behind her with white. He had the tube around his feet, you can kind of see it there. And then when I'd done that, I put my torch away, I came over, I turned on the fairy light with a little button, and I just walked the tube, the hula hoop, over him, and back down, and over her, and then I turned it off. And it was awesome. Yeah, super simple, Christmas lights wrapped around a hula hoop. That was that. And again, it's just after well, it's not just, but it's after sunset. It's not completely dark, which is why you get this lovely light in the sky and still catching on these wisps of clouds over here. And you can see a bit, here's some street lights and stuff going on. Next please, now. Right, this is really exciting. So this is a stencil portrait. This is the first one, or the first session I did where this was really effective. He's my favourite. I feel like it's my invention, which it's not, because I copied somebody else, but he did very different things. So this is my stencil that I used for this. I haven't taped it up yet, but okay, let me think. I have the camera, the stencil, the model, the coloured fabric, all in a row. I meticulously line it up through my lens so that everything is even, luckily the fabric hasn't got a centre point because that would have made it harder, but I had to line up the stencil with the model. And in this kind of scenario, if she moves 1 millimetre to the left, it's out of sync, and it doesn't look right. I lit this is probably about 30 seconds. I start the exposure, so it's dark, set it all up, focus it all, get it right, and I'm like, okay, don't move, really, not even breathe. And the camera's here, I turn off all the lights, I start the exposure with my little button, and I come behind the stencil and I light my model, which is this bit. Nope, not that bit, sorry, this bit, okay? Then, it's on a stand, I go zoop, and I fold it out the way, and I light my model again, which is this bit. Here, here, can't really see her here, you can see a little bit of her elbow here. And here, that's where she's moved, so that's where I've lit her twice, because obviously when the stencil's not there, you see all of her. So this is the bit where I lit her with the stencil, and then I lit her again, and there's a tiny bit of movement, but I like that. And then the model walks out of the picture. She's there. Then I light the fabric. With this one, I think I used the same torch for all 3 exposures, but nowadays I tend to use a warm light and a cold light to give it a bit different. There's another one coming in a second, and you might see that a little bit more. But yeah, and it's this. £1 this photo was done entirely with this and this. This I bought for £10 off that chap in the back, and this I bought for £1 from Proper Job. So you really, you can create some incredible things with £11. I mean, I did have a stand and some clips, but I found those. Yeah, next one please, Melanie. 'Cause
How
it's
do
my-
you hold the stencil steady?
I have a stand, it's what my phone is on now, and I have two clips that go like this. It's like a little lighting stand or whatever, clips, and they just clip on, and it means I can move it up or down with the clip, so if it's not exactly in the right place, I kind of move up or down until I've got it exactly right. And then it's nice, it's round, so I can just go and I fold it out of the way. This is my favourite one ever. This is Rhea. What I love about this is, here you can see the warm light, cold light. So I lit, the white balance on my camera was slightly different, so the whole picture is warmer. Technical, not important thing. This I lit with this light, and then I had another one of the same, and I just put a warm, see if it's on the top, no, it's at the bottom, it's actually brown, but it gives a warm light, this is it. So I put one of those, so I had cold light, warm light, and you can see the warm light is very yellow and kind of, it's actually quite orange, warm light, cold light. And so with the stencil, I lit her with the cold light, I moved the stencil, I lit her with the warm light, she moved, I think I lit the background with, I don't remember which one of the two, but I just used cold and warm on this one. Each time it changes, you know, sometimes I'll use like blue and pink and purple, sometimes I'll only use warm and cold. Which order it is in, it depends entirely on the evening, there's no right or wrong. What I love about this one is it's just perfect. The stencil lines up perfectly with the fabric. This is really hard. So it's like, sometimes when people are looking, I'm like, do you know how hard this is? Again, you know, it's just central with her, central with the fabric, central with the stencil. The balance is great. Sometimes I do this 25 times before I'm like, okay, this is okay, this works. I think I've probably done about 30, I collect people in this series, so I'm like, oh, have I got your stencil portrait yet? I collect people, I think I've done about 30 of my friends. There's a few hanging in the gallery at the moment. Yeah, I love this. And I always try to have different fabric. I have spent quite a lot of money on the stencils, but it was totally worth it, and I do use them for other things as well, but yeah, I love it. Oh, here we go, same kind of deal, stencil on location. So same technique, I have the stencil, but the light source that I use is steel wool. So if you light steel wool and then blow on it, you have these little sparks that come off it, which look like this in a long exposure. So here, it's actually my friend Phil, who is behind the model, so this is a collaboration with Phil. I started it, so let's think about the procedure. Camera, stencil, model, Phil. Phil has got a drill, and on the end of the drill is a crocodile clip, and in the crocodile clip is some steel wool. So we start the exposure with the stencil in place, and I say go, and Phil lights the steel wool and goes with the drill, and it throws it all around. And you can see it hits the wall here, and this light comes from the ambient light coming off the steel wool during that time. So when the steel wool's done, I move the stencil out the way, and I just briefly light dish in the face like this, so we see his face. You can see his hands are not solid because he's not been frozen in time, that's kind of ambient light. After I've lit his face, I move out of shot again, and Phil, who still stood behind him, uses this nice big torch that I showed you with a red filter, and he just backlights him essentially. So he hits all the walls. This is just a cow tunnel, by the way, in I think Wells or Shepton. You probably see some cow poo in the corner. It's literally just a square tunnel, and it's not even very long. But it's nice because it frames, it frames the picture, and it means that we can work in the rain, which is nice. Yeah, same technique with lasers. So instead of, actually no, different. Stencil in place, he has lit the purple flower. Now here, where the cow tunnel there's no walls for the flower to hit, there is no stencil. Which the steel wool, because it creates a trail, it fills that. But there's nothing for the stencil, for the light to catch, so it only catches where there's a wall. You can see the top of the tunnel here. We then move the stencil. I briefly lit the model, and then what we have is we have a red and a green laser with one of those little star adapters, and it's on a tripod behind her, which we all set up beforehand. And we use a little plumber's smoke pellet. You can buy like 30 for £15 from Screwfix. And you light it and you walk through the tunnel and you fill all the tunnel with smoke. And everywhere the smoke travels, it picks up the laser light. So these are the points of the laser light hitting the wall, and this here is the laser coming through the air, but you only see it in the picture if there's fog or smoke. So some people use vapes, but I don't vape, so I don't do that. So we use these little, in order to filter, we use these little smoke pellets. This, again, technically outstanding, love it. But most people like me don't know her, don't really care. But this is one of my favourites. Same technique. Sorry, it's a little bit bright on the old projector. Again, this was one of those competitions where they were like, can you draw some wings? And I knew that everybody would draw wings with blades, like I showed you in the other picture. I was like, right, I'm going to blow this out of water. I'm going to do something really clever. So I cut a stencil of wings, and we did this, which is the same technique. Wings with steel wool, which fills in this gap where there's no wall. Then light Tasha, backlight in red or orange possibly, green laser with the smoke. Few minutes. I wouldn't have been able to do this without Phil. I love it. And Tasha is wonderful. You might know her from the mural on the side of the globe in, same model. Okay, again, I work a lot with Phil. We have like light painting buddies. He's the local guy that I know that light paints. He lives about an hour away. We meet up a lot. He meets up with other English light painters. We also travel and meet light painters in Morocco or Berlin or Belgium or whatever, and we go and do stuff together. Phil has a drone, and this is his drone doing a test flight, trying to find the spot where we were going to do a big circle in the sky. And I was like, while you're testing your drone out, I'll just test my doors. So the same technique that I really would like the other talk, but I don't know what I did with it, which is very annoying. But I have this, in fact I didn't, I had this without the red, and I put a torch in each end. It wasn't flashing, sorry, I should turn that off, but it takes a minute. So I had a torch in each end, like this, and I stood behind each model, so they're all stood still, and I stand behind Ian and I go like this. And I made a door, and then I walked to the next guy, and I'm like, okay, and I'm like scanning them into the picture. And their silhouette is frozen by the light behind them, which is why it doesn't really matter that while I'm walking around, I think this was about a minute, as Sarah, she works here. Yeah, so super simple, just doors. And this was Phil trying to find the right, and I was like, oh, this is the one, it looks like aliens, I love it. And we did the circle one as well, and we did circles behind the models, but this for me was just it kind of feeds into my whole idea. I like things to kind of have a story. I don't really want to tell a story, you can make up your own story, but film stills, sci-fi movies, things like Tron or Blade Runner, I love that kind of visual imagery, and light painting.
Where was that last location?
It's near Froome in a quarry.
Oh, right,
Do you know where Nunny is? Nunny?
No,
It's a little village near Froome.
Yeah.
If you carry on from Froome and through Nunny out, it's just a quarry.
Those structures in the back help.
Yeah, we call it the toaster. It's an old, granite quarry, I think.
Yeah, they're really.
It's fenced it off now, which is really annoying. This is in Morocco with my friend Dave. And it's just two tubes, this red one and the yellow one. And I don't think I did them at the same time, but I focused on a point between the shoulder blades. So I spun the yellow one with a flashing torch, I spun the red one without a torch, and then I walked around with a little torch with a green filter, and I've just gone like that, like that, like that, like that, and made these little stars. Boop, 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 boop. Really hard, because sometimes they don't look like stars. I'm really bad at stars, this was really lucky. And then the ambient light is from the moon, which is why you can see the rest of the thing, it was full moon. Next one, please. Oh, this is cool. This is in Wales, again in a quarry. And she has just stood still. I don't even think I lit her. I think the light is coming from the sparkler, and I just lit a sparkler and made it look like... And the sun is coming up on this one. We've been out all night in this quarry, and we came out of the quarry. I was like, oh, quickly, before we go, let's do something with the background of the mountains and stuff. So it's just a sparkler. Wow. Super simple. You can write, you must have seen people write things and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, again, Tasha, wonderful, wonderful woman. Ooh. Fairy lights, Christmas lights, same model, she's just moved, followed her with the Christmas lights. This is quite technical. So I have put a tube, everyone understands the Christmas light silhouette thing, right? And this is where she overlaps, and I've just done the green light thing. This here is done with a sparkler, and I've put a tube over the lens of my camera. This is a technique by a guy called Pellets from Belgium. And there's a white, literally plastic tube. I think it's a bit of guttering, not guttering, like pipe from guttering, and it's over the end of my lens, and I've put it on there, held it still, I think it's on a tripod itself, and I've gone around the outside with a sparkler, so the sparkles come in, and this here is the reflection on the inside because it's a white tube. And then, after I did that, I took it off and I did the rest. So, but I don't do this very often because it's far too difficult and I don't have the patience. And then this ambient light is just coming off the fairy lights. It's literally a bunch of Christmas lights, and I've just bunched them together and got like this. Here we go, it's full. Same technique, the rainbow technique with the torch. And we mixed it with the laser. Phil's very good with lasers, his laser's also more powerful than mine. There's a puddle. The puddle was actually over here, but I kind of kicked it over with a bit of cardboard, pushed all the water into the middle of the room. And it's what makes the picture as well. Part of what I love about light painting is going and finding these really cool places and trying to make them into something awesome. And this was one of those. It's like an abandoned. For some reason in Europe they have this kind of thing all over the place. In England, if this existed, it would be fenced off and massive security. You wouldn't be able to get in. But in Europe, for some reason, they just let you wander around. It's great. Joy. I've lit her with a blue light. We found all the props. This is done with the fibre optic brush. So she did this first, and I've just lit her with the blue. She's sitting there really still. I light each part of her only once to keep her still. And then once I finish lighting her, I take the things out of her hand, put them on the table next to her, give her new things, and she raises her arms, and then I light just her arms again. So she has 4 arms. Here you can see there was a bit of movement. You can see her wrist, but it doesn't matter. Oh, again, double light. So Sophie is stood. This is a mosquito net over my friend Sophie, and she's just stood in the garden with a mosquito net. I lit her with a purple light. I then took the mosquito net off her, and she crouched down. She was really annoyed that she kept her sandals on. She was like, why didn't I take my shoes off? She just crouched down, and I lit her again. And this is actually one of the photos that won me all my fancy light painting stuff. And this is just a bright torch shining towards the camera several times. And my mum's gone with a bit of ambient light.
Oh, sorry, Donnie.
That's all right. It wasn't. I think the one before was Tasha, castle somewhere nearby. Blue, lit the outside blue. Went in behind her, lit it red, and then I used that funny little fibre optic again. This one with a red filter, and I've just gone around her like this, and I've moved it all around, and then over her hands for the fire, and I lit her briefly on the face to give her a bit of that. As you can see, it's all the same things. You just use them in slightly different ways in the different places. This was just colouring it in, but I have a little prism, a cut prism. It's actually like a vintage filter thing for a camera that it doesn't even fit my camera. I think I sellotaped it to the front or something, or heck, I don't know. But so it's just one picture, but the cut glass prism has put it in the photo 3 times. And I've just coloured each. I've walked. It's like a weird thing with lots of corridors, and I've just walked in and I've got this green and then the next one red and then backlit him. Okay, Melanie? Now, this is in my bath. And I do something called water portraits where I put people in my bath and I put lights and plants and stuff around them, which is a little bit of a different thing, but it has stemmed from light painting and just wanting to mess around with light and what you can do to make surreal, really surreal images. And this one is a long exposure. Now, it's very difficult to get your camera looking down on the bath on a tripod, which is why I don't do it very often, but we sellotaped all the edges of my gaffer tape, I should say. So my tripod is over my bath, looking down into the water, and we've put a light into the water, not an actual light, wasn't going to kill her. It's a long version of the fibre optic, and the ends light up, so the torch is on the outside of the bath, and it feeds into the fibre, and the fibres go into the bath, and they make the water glow. There's like a tiny bit of milk to diffuse the edges, so you can still see her in the water, but it's not sharp. And she's just kind of hanging in the surface of the water with her face just out, and this glow is from this fibre in the water. And on the outside of the water, we've used the fibre optic, but a white one, which is much brighter. And I've just put a blue filter on it, and I've just moved it through the image. And that's what's lighting her. This blue is from the fibre optic. This line is obviously it's hit her face. So this is just a swoosh with that fibre optic kind of over her, and the glow is a constant light. This was on all the time. I would love to do this more, but it really is a bit of a headache.
Is that the last one?
I think we might be at the last one, yeah, because this is where we're getting a little bit more experimental and like out there and stuff. But yeah, so that was a pretty wide variety of the things that I do, and then I mix them all together in different places. And it's really fun because you never really know what you're going to get. And sometimes you go there and you're like, right, I'm going to do this. And then it doesn't work. And you do something completely different that you never even thought of, and it's way better anyway. So yeah, if
So
anybody
we've
has
got
any
5 minutes.
questions,
Anybody want to ask him any?
Yeah, just a quick one really.
yeah, go for
We
it.
haven't spoken about the models, but they they obviously played a big part of it.
Yes.
And all these are people that you know, they're not
They're
professional
all,
models
nobody,
anyway.
none of them are models.
And
None of them. They're
you've
all
asked
just
them-
my friends.
You've asked
I'm-
them to do some quite sort
I
of
do ask them to do
difficult
some.
things.
Sometimes they offer to do strange things. Tasha, for example, is like, "Oh, Kim, we should go here and climb this tree, and I should wear this dress, and we should do this." But others, I'm like, "Don't suppose you'd like to come and stand in a cold quarry at 4 o'clock in the morning and wear a really uncomfortable dress and stand there?" Yeah, they're just my friends, and it's what makes it fun for me as well. I like hanging out with them. It's that experience I was talking about. We go out and we have an adventure, and then we have this keepsake that is this cool image that's different.
Do they contribute in any way?
Often,
towards it?
yes. They
Yeah.
go, "Why don't you do this?" Or "Why don't..." Tasha, again, she's always like, "Oh, I want you to try that light when I'm doing this." And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Is it important that all the effects are in camera
For me, yes.
rather than with any kind of manipulation?
In light painting, there's this balance between people who are purists, which
Yeah.
I probably am if I'm honest with myself, and people who use it as part of a bigger picture. Commercially, it's not practical to be a purist. I don't do this commercially. I do this for me, like
Well, no, so
100% for me.
The 30 to get the one. Is,
Yeah, and I'd much rather do it in camera because that's where they're fun. I'm not interested in
Yeah.
digital manipulation. I'm not interested in working on my computer. I'm interested in creating a picture in my camera
Well, it
using...
does make for a more dynamic image. It's a bit like
Yeah.
the idea of CGI and in-camera effects in,
Yeah,
in film.
for
That's
sure.
much more interesting.
Yeah, it's
in
just a
camera.
different, a different skill. I believe some people mix the two. You know, they take a bunch of different light paintings and they mix them together and create
Yeah.
these incredible images, which has its place, but it's not what I'm interested in doing. I'm also lazy. I don't like working on my computer, and I'm not very good at it.
Yeah. And have all your work been done on digital cameras, or do you use
I
film?
have done film,
Yeah.
so
The difference is?
money. If you want to shoot 36 photos, of which one might be good on film, that's going to cost you £50.
Yeah.
Whereas digital, it won't cost me anything.
Yeah.
If I was a millionaire, I would shoot only film because it proves to people that I haven't done it on a computer. But I don't need to prove anything to anyone because I'm doing it for me.
Yeah.
So
But
I
you wouldn't be able to tell really from the...
No, I
from-
do have a
from
friend.
the-
So we have a friend in Morocco, Cisco. He does, him and his wife do calligraphy.
Yeah.
And they shoot digitally, but they also simultaneously shoot film. So they have 2 cameras because he's in the market where he's proving to people that there's nothing added and nothing taken
Yeah.
away. It's like, look, this is on film. Do you understand now what we're doing? Whereas if you do it on digital, they just assume you've done something afterwards on the computer. Sometimes it'll be a bit dark and I might brighten it up a bit.
Right.
But I would never, unless, I think there was one image in my book where behind the white sheet that I was using to create the silhouette, there was the red dot on a plug. Really annoying because it was a whole blue image and there was this little red dot in the corner. I took the red dot out from the book. But yeah, that's about the limit of what I can do.
I appreciate that, yeah.
I
Have
don't
you-
understand where the light comes from when you've got the wire wool.
So, the wire wool, if you light it, it glows. It like burns, but not with a flame. It burns
How
like
are you lighting it?
with a lighter. I just light it with a lighter. I turn around and I light it with a lighter, and then I go shh, and it flies all over the place.
It's on fire.
Filings into
Yeah.
It's on fire.
It's on fire,
I
but it doesn't
didn't
have
understand
flames.
that.
It's on fire. It kind of fizzles. fizzles apart.
I haven't understood that.
Yeah. There's a whole scene which is just people that use wire wool to create things. It's usually in circles because you spin it to make it fly in every direction. I should have put one in there. I always try and think of a way of having the wire wool different. So either to use it to fill that space behind the stencil. There's one time where we were in a lift shaft and I did it so it hit the wall and then fell straight down behind the model in the lift shaft. I like to try and be a little bit different and think a bit outside the box. It's not always possible, but
I just love the fact that we're all striving for that in our art, that unknown bit that we don't have control over.
yeah, that's the fun bit. Serendipity is like the
exactly.
best thing.
Exactly.
I also do it with my film photography. I layer lots of photos over the top of each other. And people go, oh, do you plan this? And I'm like, no, it's luck. But the luck is what makes it extra exciting when you get it
Yeah.
back. It's definitely, serendipity is really really fun.
Okay, so it's an hour now, and I did promise some people who were going to come that it wouldn't be longer than now. So thank you so much. Kim is not disappearing.
No,
We
we've got tea and coffee.
tea and coffee and cake behind the screen. So do stay if you want to ask her any more questions, and
Yeah.
please
And I'll
tell
come and sit
people
outside with you.
about these art talks, because you know it's. I think it's really interesting to be able to have an experience of other people's processes, and they happen every month.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
Okay,
Well done.
let's turn the lights on and eat some cake.
Brilliant.
I take photographs.